Africa, home to untapped potential, vital resources, and a young, booming population. But behind the cranes, railroads, and ports, there's a bigger story unfolding. Is China building infrastructure or an empire? As of 2025, over 37 African nations are part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, and Chinese loans total $140 billion across the continent. But is this mutual cooperation, or something far more calculated? Welcome to Talk Maniac, where today we dissect China's growing footprint in Africa, bust myths around debt trap diplomacy, run the numbers, and expose what mainstream headlines aren't saying. It all began with trade. In the early 2000s, China-Africa trade hovered around $10 billion. By 2025, that number stands at $210 billion, making China Africa's largest trading partner. But trade isn't where China stops. From the $4 billion Mombasa-Nairobi Railway in Kenya to solar farms in Ghana, China is financing roads, ports, airports, hospitals, and more. Dr. Congo provides 70% of global cobalt, essential for Chinese EVs. Nigeria and Angola are critical suppliers of oil. The annual trade deficit for Africa is $30 billion with China as of 2025. So, why is China so invested? Because these projects serve three Chinese goals: resource security, for its manufacturing and tech industries; market access, to absorb Chinese overcapacity, like steel exports; and geopolitical influence, a long-term, soft, and strategic power projection. One term dominates Western media narratives: debt trap diplomacy. This theory suggests China intentionally gives unsustainable loans so it can later seize strategic assets. But what does the data actually say? Let's look at Zambia. Total external debt in 2024, $37.2 billion. Debt to China, $6.6 billion, around 18%. Zambia's GDP, $31 billion. Interest payments to China, at an average of 3%, come to about $200 million a year. The debt service ratio estimate, interest payments of about $600 million versus exports of $2.4 billion, equals 25%. The IMF distress threshold is 15 to 20%. But in 2024, China restructured $4 billion of Zambia's debt. No seizure, no ports taken. Instead, renegotiation, not retaliation. Now, Kenya's SGR loan, $3.6 billion, with annual repayments of about $500 million. Kenya's GDP is $100 billion. In 2025, there's a tariff removal on $200 million in Kenyan exports to China. This isn't a trap, it's a negotiation. Secret clause concerns? Yes, those exist. But hard evidence of widespread seizures? Still lacking. Beyond money and steel, China's presence in Africa is strategic. The Djibouti naval base, opened in 2017, secures Red Sea trade routes and protects Chinese investments. 90% of Ethiopia's imports come through Djibouti. The base sits just miles from a US base. This is not just development, it's a calculated geopolitical anchor. On the education front, by 2025, over 90,000 African students are in Chinese universities. Full scholarships, Mandarin learning, and cultural exchange, all boosting soft power. And in 2025, China forgives $1 billion in zero-interest loans to 17 African nations. Critics say it's a PR move. Supporters argue it's a goodwill gesture amid Western stagnation. But make no mistake, China is not pulling out, it's doubling down, just more discreetly. As debt criticism mounted and China's economy slowed, with GDP growth in 2025 at 4.5%, Beijing pivoted. Gone are the days of those mega railways. Now it's about smaller, high-return investments. For example, there are $200 million solar farms in Ghana, with a projected return on investment of 10% annually, compared to just 5% from those legacy rail projects. China is choosing efficiency over spectacle. And Africa, it's playing smart too. Nigeria's Lekki deep-sea port, which opened in 2023 at a cost of $5 billion, uses Chinese financing, but local stakeholders retain management. The game is no longer China imposing, it's Africa negotiating. Western headlines, love phrases like China colonizing Africa or Beijing's neo-imperial agenda, but this leaves out a crucial truth. African agency. African leaders are not passive. They're choosing China because there are fewer strings than the IMF, no political interference, and faster disbursement and delivery. Meanwhile, the West's Build Back Better World program pledged $600 billion, but it only dispersed just $20 billion by 2025. So, who's really failing Africa? Is China's influence in Africa problematic? Yes. If contracts lack transparency or if political leverage grows unchecked. But is it a silent empire? The facts show a complex dance, not a quiet conquest. African countries face real debt distress with 40% at high risk. China is restructuring, not seizing. Trade deficits persist, but 2025 tariff cuts are, well, softening the blow. The final trade balance forecast: exports to China $90 billion, imports $120 billion. A tariff cut could boost exports by 10%, which is plus $9 billion. That means the new deficit is $21 billion. Still imbalanced, but definitely improving. In 2025, Africa sits at a geopolitical crossroads. It's not about being caught between empires, it's about choosing how to use leverage, not be used. China's strategy is bold, but Africa's response will decide the future. Stay curious, stay critical. This is Talk Maniac, unpacking the global game one hidden truth at a time. Subscribe for deep dives on geopolitics, strategy, and what's really shaping our world.